might not survive because they're a significant part of the funding of this show. Year of Learning by Children, Grandchildren. Who's that fun-looking guy? A Year of Learning by the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Toby Peres, Saratova, Bas Yisrael Dave. Charlie Galvinstein and Sam Levine in memory of Ramona Rachel Mata Bas Asher. I think tomorrow's her yard site.
Next Saturday.
Oh, okay. 8 days is your yard site. Friends of Nina Moinister, Nechama Asna Bas Yitzchak, friends of Stephen Vigder, Simcha Melech Ben Meir Leib Halevi, friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece Leah Bracha Bas Rivka. Why she doesn't have the father's name, I don't know. Month of Learning, Rebecca, Lewis, and Susan Witansky in memory of Rebecca's uncle and Lewis's brother, Pesach, I believe, Ben Yosef. Carol and Josh Sanborn in memory of her mother, Yetta Bas Nachman Binyamin. Mel and Haran Haller in memory of his brother, Yaakov Ben Avraham. Week of Learning, Evelyn and Isaac Blacher in memory of her father, Rav Yeshaya Yitzchak Ben Rav Yisrael Yechiel Halevi, and that she should have a refuah shalema, Evelyn. Judy Iger in memory of her father, Eliyahu Ben Yosef Mordechai. What's today's date?
All day.
23rd.
Today's the 24th.
24th. Okay, that's it.
24th.
Okay, so again, we want to learn and discuss that Yossi Chain should have a recovery. Okay, we're on the last line of Kuf Ches Amid Beis. For this Mishnah and for this rest of the day, and I don't know because I didn't do beyond, what we have to keep in mind is that certain marriages, for example, but not exclusively, a little girl married off by her mother and or her brother or brothers is a rabbinic marriage. That same little girl married off by her father is a Torah marriage. The marriages all of us have, mistama, are, unless you married a little girl, are Torah marriages. Now, one of the things we're going to deal with in today's Gemara is where there becomes a conflict between a rabbinic marriage and a Torah marriage, and obviously the Torah marriage trumps. So if we keep that in mind, it simplifies everything. Okay? Now, Ha-megoresh es ha'isha. If Abramowitz divorces his wife, v'hachazira, and then he takes her back and marries her again, and then he dies, and neither marriage produced children, nor have any co-wives produced children.
Say that again, slower. Please.
Ruvain marries Rivka. He divorces her. He remarries her. He dies. Okay, now, neither Rivka nor any co-wife produced children. So she is now mistama, a yavama.
So regardless of when he married her the first time or married her.
Doesn't matter which
second
marriage.
time,
If he does not
then
have
he
living
has
children,
not produced.
or he did and they died. So at the point of his death, he has no living children, not from her, not from any other woman. Okay?
They died, then she goes, it automatically becomes a zik.
Well, maybe yes, maybe no. If you count the fact that she's a divorcee, then her brother-in-law is an erva. If you account the fact the second marriage and there were no children, then she has a zika to the brother-in-law, which overcomes the erva. And she is mechuyev, or they are mechuyev, to either do yibum or chalitza. So that's the question. whether the divorce affects or whether the divorce does not affect her status and whether there's a zika. So the Mishnah says, muteris liyavam, that Sydney got it right, that the second marriage trumps the first marriage. She is simply a widow without offspring or any of her co-wives having living offspring. So she's mutter to the yavam. But why did I explain it the way I did? Rabbi Eliezer, now it may be, it says Rabbi Eliezer here and throughout the next piece of Gemara, but the Mishnayos almost always have Rabbi Eliezer, but Eliezer. But since it's consistently misidentified, we'll just stick with it. But just remember, it's always Rabbi Eliezer because Rabbi Eliezer is in Amira. All right. So anyway, Rabbi Eliezer Oser, he says, no, you have to look at her whole life. She's this man's Gerusha as well as his Almana. And that trumps, in his opinion, and she does not have a Zika to the brother-in-law. Okay. And there will eventually be an issue of whether there's no Zika at all and she just goes off and does what she feels like it, or if they require chalitza. So keep that in mind.
That's if the father married her the first time.
No. This is a grown woman.
Oh, a grown woman. Oh.
This is still a grown woman. Who the issue here is the first marriage, she's a divorcee. The second marriage, she's an almana. And does the fact that she's a divorcee affect if there's a zika or not? So the Chachamim say no, and Rabbi Elazar says yes. V'chein ha-miguresh es ha-yisama v'cha-azira muteres liyavam. Tanakama says, similarly, if it's a little girl whose father is dead, she's a yisama, and her brother or her mother marries her off, that's a rabbinic marriage. Okay, so do we say that a rabbinic marriage generates a zika? So it does, it generates a zika midrabanan, which is different than a zika midiraisa. No, her brother or her mother.
When the father marries her off.
We'll get there.
Okay, because once he dies, she's automatically goes back home.
What?
Once he dies.
Right.
So I'm mixing up something.
If the little girl, at this point in the Mishnah, the little girl is married by her mother or her brother, and it's a rabbinic marriage. So we ask the question, does a rabbinic marriage generate a zika? And again, the Chachamim say yes, muteres liyavam, Rabbi Elazar Oiser, and Rabbi Elazar says no. Now we're going to get to the same another little girl, similar situation, but this time it's Tati who marries her off. So even though she's only 10 years old, this is a rabbinic, not a rabbinic, this is a Torah marriage. Katana, Shehisiya Aviha, her father married her. Viniskarisha, and then the husband, I call him the dirty old man, divorces her. Okay. Now, what is the Gemara says? She is like a yasama b'chayavi. She is as if she's an orphan, even though her father's alive. So what does that mean? That means that since her marriage was a legitimate marriage and the husband divorced her, she's Stama Gerusha. And she no longer is under her father's suzerainty. So he cannot marry her to anybody else. Okay, he no longer has control over her. Let us put it this way, she's an emancipated female divorcee. Okay, and now, so the chazira. So if the man who was her husband has charata and says, I really liked having this little girl around cooking eggs for me and warming my bed, and he takes her back. So, and now he dies. So everybody agrees now that the second marriage is only midrabana, because she married himself to him.
She was still a minor.
And she's still not yet 12 years and a day. So this marriage is purely rabbanan, and it's almost like frowned on, we learned the other day, so that her divorcee status, unlike the fully fledged adult woman, where there's like a competition, whether she's a gerusha midiraisa or a widow midiraisa, this little girl is a gerusha min hatayra, and she is a almana only midrabanan. So divrei hakol asura yavam, she cannot do yibum with her dead husband's surviving brother.
Because he's an Arab,
Because he's an erva min hatayra. Okay.
So in that case, her status of a gerusha
Overcomes because that's Torah and that's the Rabbanan. I mean, always Torah trumps Rabbanan. So again, if you just keep in mind that distinction, it clarifies everything before we even clarify everything. My time at the okay, so Omar Eifa, a fellow named Eifa, asks, my time at the Rebbe Eliezer. Why does he keep saying she's Oser, even when the Chachamim or the Tanakama says she's Mutter? Hoel the Amda Alav Sha'a Achas Isura. He says, let's look at the situation. We're talking now about the Reisha, the adult woman. When her husband divorced her, she now has established that she's an erva to his sibling, because you're not allowed to marry your brother's wife, whether she's divorced or whether she's a widow, except in the case of childless, and there's the Torah requirement of Yibum. So here, she gets divorced. If 2 months pass, the husband remarries her. So she had that 2-month window where she was an erva to him. So according to Eifa's explanation, Rabbi Lazar says, once there was a bona fide erva, the remarriage does not eliminate it. Okay? Remember, now these are both on Torah level. But maybe that's not so. Because we did say, I said, keep in mind the business of whether she's going to need a chalitza or not. The rabbis are going to now challenge, if she's a bona fide erva, then she shouldn't require chalitza. But Rebbe Lezer does ask her to do chalitza. Amrle Rabbanan le'efa. So the rabbis challenge Eifa's explanation. Ihachi chalitza nami lo boy. She shouldn't even require chalitza. V'chi tema hachi nami. And if you tell me, okay, she doesn't require chalitza, that's a problem. Disanya, we have a brisa where the Rabbi Eliezer himself says, Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, Amru chaletzes. She does need chalitza. So apparently at this point, Rabbi Eliezer is saying that the Torah erva trumps the remarriage, but after all, she is an almana without kids. Midrabanan, we're going to require chalitza. We can't say it's chalitza midiraisa because she's an erva. But midrabanan, because they don't want people to get confused, they require a chalitza. So Eifa revises his opinion. Ella Omer Efa, Rabbi Eliezer lo yudanim my time. So your question is a good one, and maybe I'm not so sure about what Rabbi Elazar's rationale that she is forbidden to him. Okay, so Omer Rabbi says, I have an answer. Haina time at the Rabbi Elazar. Here's Rabbi Elazar's rationale. Misafgale. So Rabbi Elazar has a doubt. Imisa mafeles o nisuyin harishonim mafilim. He can't figure out whether the second marriage and his death is the principle that affects her relationship with her brother-in-law, or whether the first marriage and the divorce is the principle that affects his relationship with the Yava. So he's not definitively saying because she was an erva for a while. He's saying, I'm not sure which marriage governs the situation, and when in doubt, throw it out. So, if it's his death that affects it, then she should have to do yibam. But if it's the first marriage that governs, then she obviously couldn't, because amda alav sha'achas be'iser, since there was this point in time where she was a gerusha and there was an erva barrier. So therefore, I'm going to say do chalitza and solve the problem. Now this time it would be, according to Abaye, it would be chalitza diraisa, and he's saying we'll do chalitza. If there's no bond, so we did chalitza. If there is a bond, we did chalitza. So that's why his opinion. Rava has a different answer. Rava Omer li'aylam pshita l'Rebbe Eliezer demisa mafeles. No, it is the second relationship, the second marriage that governs. Okay, umihu hakol beki'in b'girushin v'ein hakol beki'in b'chazara. But everybody in town knows they got divorced. He made a big kiddush in shul celebrating the end of a miserable marriage. And when they remarried, people aren't so aware of that. So it's a matter of we do chalitza. We don't let them do yibum, even though technically they should, because of public, might create a scandal, and we make them do chalitza instead. So Adarabba, the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Chazora, Kevan, Diyasva, Tuse Isle Kola. Since everybody it's sort of a big deal when a woman moves back in with the guy who divorced her and made a kiddush and shul to celebrate. So everybody is going to be aware of the fact that she moved back in. So now everybody's going to be aware of the fact that they're remarried, and there's no reason to make a gezerah they should only do chalitza. So the Gemara says, Mi lo askinen, wasn't there the following possibility? The ahadra be'ursa, he remarries her on Tuesday evening, v'shchiv betzvara, and then he's dead in the bed when they wake up in the morning. So here's a case where nobody knew about it. A word hadn't gotten out yet that Rivka moved back in with Reuven. So this is explaining that there is rationale to require a chalitza rather than allow yibum. That's Rava. Ravashi comes up with another thing. Hainu time of the Rebbe Elazar. Here is his rationale. The gozer hani mishum Yesoima b'chai aviv v'chazira. We heard in the Mishnah that most child marriages are midrabanan, but when the father does it, it's the Raisa. And the Mishnah said everybody agrees that since the first marriage was the Raisa and the second marriage was midrabanan, that her divorcee status is the defining thing. So if we allow other remarriage situations to do yibum, that'll become a pattern, and people are going to screw up and let the little girl do yibum with the brother. So they make a global gezerah, so that that little girl, the geyser honey, we make a gezerah on all second marriages, mishum yisoma b'chayaviv v'achazira, that he took her back. Okay, now the Gemara likes that. Okay, hachinami mistaber, that makes a lot of sense. The mikatani seifa, because later in the Mishnah, to the end of the Mishnah, we said katana hashasiya aviha v'niskarasha. The little girl was married by her father, and the husband divorced her. It's as if she's an orphan, even though her father is still alive. V'chazira, so if he takes her back, divrei hakol she'asur liyavam, everybody agrees that the Torah relationship and the divorce trumps the rabbinic second marriage, and she's asur to the yavam. Hi, my lamemra. So why do we have to even mention that? That should be obvious. Pshita, that should be obvious. Father cannot, this is where we know this, Kenny. The father can only marry her, or the brothers, only marry her off at once. And after that, she's emancipated, and any other childhood marriages are on her own initiative. Okay? Elalav, ha kamash malan. So what are we trying to say? We're going back. Time of the rationale here for the earlier cases where Rebbe Lazar says you have to do chalitza, you can't do yibum. The Rebbe Lazar, legozer ha'anach mishum hai, that he ushers all second marriage yibums to the case of the second marriage of the little girl. Shmamina. So the Gemara accepts that as the answer. Now we're going to back it up. Tanya Kavase de Ravashi, we have a brisa that supports Ravashi's understanding of the rationale. Maidim chachamim l'Rebbe Lazar b'ketana shehesiya vuha v'niskarsha. The rabbis did not challenge Rebbe Lazar. They said everybody agrees, the Mishnah said, that in that case remarriage is not permitted. Why? Harehi ki yasoma b'chayav. It's as if she's an orphan in her father's lifetime. Again, that means she has no father in control of her. Okay. V'chazira she'asur liyavam, and therefore the second marriage is only midrabanan, and she's still a child, and therefore she's asur to the yavam. Mipnei shegirusheha gerushin gemurin. Her divorce is a halachically valid divorce on every conceivable way, not a pun, because it's a Torah level. The ein chazara chazra gemura, but the second marriage is not a complete marriage; it's only midrabana. B'madvarim amurim. So what are we talking about over here? Beger shekeshehi katana. He married her, let's say, when she's 10. He divorces her a few months later, and then he takes her back when she's only 11. Okay, so the whole thing happened when she was a child. But what if the take back is the Eraisa? Aval, Gersha Kishihikatana, he divorces her while she's still yet less than 12 in a day. V'chazara Kishigadayla, and he waits till she's 12 in a day to remarry her. Inam Ishachazira Kishikatana, the Godla Etzlo Umes, or he takes her back when she's 11, and they live together for a year and a half, 2 years. Now she's under, she's above 12 and a half when he dies. So now, all right, it will come up in a few minutes. Did they have Bia while she was an adult? Because if they have, even if you consider the initial relationship with the Rabbanan, we know that Bia is a valid form of marriage. So if he has Bia with her when she's an adult, that turns the rabbinic marriage into a Torah marriage. Or there is a view that you don't even need the Bia. The fact that she's still in the house is good enough. Like we send a couple to a yichud room, and that's the symbolic being together. That I don't know of a single couple that ever did Bia in the yichud room. It may have happened, but oh, you know about it? Once upon a time. I'm talking about nowadays. Okay.
So from they have separate yichud rooms.
I hear. Okay, so they remarried at 11, and now she's halachically an adult, and so the marriage transitions into a diraisa marriage. So then, ochaletzis o misyavemes. So then there's no question that she may now, because the second relationship is just as Torah firm as the first relationship. So it is an analog to the first case in the Mishnah. Okay, so now she can do one or the other, but we still have Rav Elazar sticking to his guns. Mishum Rav Elazar Amru, Chaletzes velo misyavemes, only chalitza, he sticks to his guns. Okay? Boy mine Rava me Rav Nachman. So Rava asked Rav Nachman a question. Mahu. We've been talking about this little girl, but it's possible, maybe even probable, that the husband has other wives. What is their status? So he gufa gezerah. Amalei, Rav Nachman says he gufa gezerah. We extend the gezerah that she shouldn't do yibum to all of the co-wives as well. Ana nekum v'nigzer gezerah l'gezerah. So he challenges that, Rava, but that turns out to be a gezerah l'gezerah. You don't let the little girl remarry because there's a complication of rabbinic and Torah. So you don't let her marry the brother-in-law. I understand that, but now you're going to say her co-wives who are adults, who married as adults, that lived with him as adults, he died, they were still adults, and we don't let them do yibum. That's a Torah law. How can you make a gezerah l'gezerah? So the Gemara answers, Ha Tanya Mishum Rabbi Elazar. We learned Amru. We learned that Rabbi Elazar said, Hey tzarasa chaletzes. No, the co-wives, one of the co-wives also does chalitza. Hey tzarasas al kedaitach. You're saying, so the Gemara asks like a little klutz kasha. You're saying the little girl has to do chalitza and the grown-up wife has to do chalitza? We know all along that only one chalitza is necessary. Elalav, we have to change the brisa. That's critical. We're not saying we understand the brisa differently. We're saying rewrite the brisa. One or the other should do chalitza. So the Gemara says, if you're changing the brisa that means the brisa is no longer authoritative. Now the brisa is an immoral level statement, and it doesn't have the authenticity and the authority of a brisa. Lav tirutze ke mitarza. So if you're altering the text of the brisa, I got a better idea. Tiritzachi, rewrite the brisa like this. He choletzes, the remarried divorcee requires chalitza because we're not sure of whether there's a zika or not. Tzarasa and the other woman where there's a vadai zika, o choletzes o misyamemes. Let the brother-in-law make a decision to either give her chalitza vadai or take her, because we can't say that a suffix trumps a vadai. So if you're going to alter the brisa, this is an alternate alteration, and therefore the brisa proves nothing. Okay, and we're still left with the explanations given earlier. Next Mishnah. Two guys, Shnei Achin, Nesuin L'Shtei Achios Ketanos. Ruvain and Shimon are brothers, and they marry Leah and Rivka. One is 10 and one is 11. Okay? Now, Umeis Baila Shel Achas Mehen, and then one of the men dies. Now, again, no children. This is a Pashut case. She was unable to have children yet, right? Ha lezu teitze mishum achos isha. So the girl whose husband died, she is free to live her life. She doesn't have to can't do yavama. She can't do yibam. She doesn't have to do chalitza because she is the sister of the guy's other wife. And even though they're both children and that marriage is only rabbinic, the first marriage is also only rabbinic. So they're on the same madrega, the same laws apply. It's a yivam or chalitza midrabanan, but the erva is midiraisa, so therefore no chalitza is required. Now the Mishnah throws in, there are other women for whom, even if they're 45 years old, their marriages are at best midrabanan. We always talk about cheresh shatav v'katan. We package them. So what happens if a chareshes, a deaf-mute woman, gets married? Now, I mean, you could put the ring on her finger or you could put the coins in her hand. She's not blind. Should we make the assumption she's aware she got a gift? And it's a rabbinic marriage at best, okay? So what happens if you replace the two little girls in the brothers marrying sisters scenario with two brothers marrying two deaf-mute women? So what?
No.
So the situation is identical. They're both rabbinic, and the halacha would be the same. Okay? V'chein shtei chershos, same situation. Oh, so that's what we just did. Same situation, because again, even though she's a deaf mute, she still has a sister who's married to the other dude, and he can't do yibum. Now, let's complicate life. Let's say one brother is married to an adult woman, and one brother is married to her little sister who's 10 years old. Gedoyl of a katana, Mace Baila Shel Katana, the guy with the 10-year-old has a heart attack. Okay? So, Teitzei HaKatana, so the little girl goes free without anything. Mishum Achazisha, because she is the sister of the surviving brother's wife. Okay? Now, what about if the older woman's husband dies? Okay, Meis Baila Shel Gedaila. Now, the older woman is an almana with no children. She has a Torah level zika to the other sibling, surviving sibling, who is married midrabanan to her little sister. So what do we do then? Because now we have the issue of does Torah trump Rabbanan? Rabbi Eliezer Aimer, Milamdin esakatana shete ma'en bo. We talked the little girl into doing miyun with her husband. We convince her, you give her a Barbie doll, whatever you have to do to convince her to do miyun. So now there's no barrier because now the Torah Zika, oh, he doesn't have a little girl. It was only midrabanan, so we don't go to the rule that if they were ever married to a sister, then it's an erva, and that's what you do. Rabban Gamliel Aimer, im me'ana, but if she does miyun ma'ana, she did miyun, presumably without being pressured. If the little girl takes it upon herself to make it possible for her older widowed sister to move in, fine and dandy. The imlav, if not, what do we do? Tamtin ashitagadil. We wait a year or two. The widow waits till the little girl is 12 and a day. V'teitze halezu mishemachas isha, and then the older sister goes off without chalitza because now she is the sister of a Torah level wife on the surviving brother. Okay? And so that v'teitze halezu mishum achas isha, she's married. But Rav Yeshua says no. Rav Yeshua says this wait business we do it right away, and both women get to draw the short straw. Rabbi Yeshua Aimer, Oy lo alishto, oy lo aleshes achiv, woe upon the woman who is the widow, and woe upon the little girl who's a rabbinic wife. Maitzeyas ishto beget. The old man gives the little girl a get, and she moves out. V'eshes achiv, and now the other woman is a zika diraisa, and only the sister of an ex-wife midrabanan. So what we do is require her to perform chalitza. Okay? So again, if you hold cup that there's the Raisa and the Rabbanan, it all flows. Okay. Now the Gemara, we said, but we twist the little girl's arm, so to speak, to force her, we cajole her, more accurately, into doing miyun. Are you allowed to do that? Mishori, are you allowed to do that? V'hasanya bar kapara says, and we're going to do a brisa that has 6 statements, only one of which is applicable, right? Liyaylam yibdak adam b'shleisha devarim. A man should be cleave to 3 things, okay? V'yisrachek b'shleisha devarim, and he should push away. He should distance himself from 3 things. Yavik b'shleisha devarim. What 3 things should he cling to? B'chalitza. He should prefer to do chalitza with his sister-in-law, the widow, rather than yibam. And we'll explain. We learned earlier that you have to do it l'shem yibam. You're not supposed to enjoy it. You're not supposed to think, oh, she's a real hottie. I'm lucked out. I got her. right? It's supposed to be l'shem mitzvah, and men are pretty difficult, if not impossible, to do that. Uba'avas shalom, that a person should always endeavor to create peace between people who are having an argument. Oh, b'chaforas nedorim, and a person should, if he makes a vow, you're not supposed to lechatchila make a vow. And the Chachamim went further and say, if you do make a vow, what you should do is go to the Rav or to make a bezdin of your buddies and be matir your neder. Okay, rather than fill it, which is an interesting concept. Okay, v'yisrache.
Isn't it, Forrest and Dawn is talking about
No,
the
here,
wife is never?
no. Here, that's usually the lashon, but here we're talking about his nullifying his own vow with an adam chashuv or a bezdin. We're gonna look when we spell it out. You'll see. Okay, but that's a good question. And the Rishonim discuss why they use that word. The Yisrach l'shloisha devarim. Why? What about the three things you should distance yourself from? Minha meyun. You should distance yourself from being in a situation where you try to talk a little girl into leaving her husband. Okay, min hapikadonos. You should distance yourself from doing your friend just won the lottery. He's got this pocket full of money. He says, I don't trust myself. Do me a favor, guard my money. And whenever I need money, I'll ask you for it. Don't do it, the Gemara says. Omin ha'arevonos, do not co-sign loans for other people. Okay, so in any event, it said here that don't talk little girls into doing miyah. Now, so the Gemara says, yeah, but that's when your interest, you had your eye on little Rivkila, and her brother married her off to some guy. So we learned earlier, you can go and you could talk little Rivkila into marrying you, and that would be a miyun. That's what you're not allowed to do. Miyun de mitzvah shiny. But here, you're doing the miyun, so her older sister can do the Torah mitzvah of Yibum. So that would be not applicable. That memra would not be applicable. Now the Gemara, as it is usually wont to do, spells out the whole brisa, right? Gufa. Tanya Bar Kapara teaches Li'aylam Yibdek Adam B'Shleish Dvarim should cling to three things, B'Chalitza. So now it's going to spell out why you prefer Chalitza over Yibam. Ka'Abba Sha'ol, because Abba Sha'ol, the Sanya, he explains. Abba Sha'ol Omer, he says like this, Hakaine says Yivamto L'Shem Noi. If you say, I'm going to marry my sister-in-law because she's a beautiful woman, oh, l'shem ishus, or because I haven't been able to get anybody to marry me, I'm sort of not good looking and I got bad breath, but here she has to marry me. I lucked out. If that's the rationale, oh, l'shem davar acher, or for some other ulterior motive, like your dead brother was rich, and by marrying her, you get all that geld, okay? Or any other ulterior motive. Ke'ilu pogeya be'erva. It's as if you figured out a loophole to do what is really in your own mind an erva. My sister-in-law is a hottie, and now I can get at her. So you're using the Torah to do something that's really not the right machshav. Yes.
He didn't kill his brother,
No.
so, what he's doing it. It fell into his lap.
Yeah, but
Not his
again,
mind. He had nothing to do with
I
it.
thought I clearly explained. There is even an opinion, we're about to learn, that it is so horrible that if it weren't for the fact that it would create new issues, we would say that the child that's supposed to be produced is a mamzer. It is wrong. That's why we never do yibum anymore. Unless you can completely divorce yourself from any other motivations, then I am doing a Torah mitzvah. When you pick up a lulav, you do not say, wow, I can poke Shmuley in the eye. I've been waiting a year. You do it l'shem mitzvah. Well, poking your sister-in-law also has to be l'shem mitzvah.
How hard it is to do any yibum.
That's the point. That's why we don't do it anymore. And that's why on Daf Beis already, I think it was Reb Zera said, always do chalitza. They have better machshavas than we do. First of all, they can have 4 or 5 wives. So they're not so deprived of intimacy that they can. All right, weiter, okay? So now, here is what Rabbi Shaul says. V'korev be'enai lios havlad mamzer. As far as I'm concerned, he says, that child is ke'ein a mamzer. Because it is so impossible to have the right machshavas. Okay? So that's his view. And that's why at this point in the historicity of the development of halacha, the Abba Shaul is saying chalitza, not yibum. Okay? Now, bi'avas shalom, what about avas shalom? Bokeh shalom v'rodefehu. The pasuk says, seek, look for peace, ask for peace, and chase after it. Turn the page. Amar Rav Avuhu explains, Amar Rebbe Avuhu, Asya Redifa. He makes a gezerah shava between this pasuk and another pasuk that has the word Redifa in it. Ksiv hacha b'kei shalom rodefehu over here. Look for, ask for peace and chase after it. Uksiv hasam in another pasuk it says roidev tzedakah, chase after the opportunity to give tzedakah, the chesed and doing chesed. Yimotzei chayim tzedakah v'kavod, and what the result will be is that you'll gain life and charity and honor. Now, since we know that we're not supposed to pursue honor in this lifetime, the words chaye and kavod are tip-offs that if you do tzedakah and act nicely to other people in this life, then you'll wind up being in a seat of honor and having people act, the angels act charitably toward you in the next life, okay? Now the next step, Bahafrasas Nidarim, canceling vows, okay? Reb Nachman says as following. Reb Nachman Aimer, he says, Haneider ke'ilu bana bama. Making a vow is as if you built a backyard altar. Okay, now up until the time of Bias Rishon, such a thing was permitted. But from Bias Rishon on, such a thing is forbidden. And this is now after Bias Sheni. So it's hundreds and hundreds of years established that you can't have a bama. And he says making a vow is like building a bama. And furthermore, he says, Vaha mekaimo, if you fulfill the vow rather than nullify it, ke'ilu hikriv aleha korban. What you think you're doing properly. I promised my wife I would never eat cookies again. So unless you eat cookies, it's like you're sacrificing on a bama. Okay, that's for all of us whose wives push us on the diet. You can tell them I learned it in the Gemara. Okay, so what do you have to do? You have to be mafter the neder. Rather, so you see, Reuven, it's his own neder. Okay, now what about the distancing things? The Yisrachik, B'shloish Devarim, stay away from three things. Min HaMiyunin, that we dealt with already. Lama Gedola Umischarta Ba. Why do we not allow, you're talking about a 10 or 11-year-old. Why do we say you should not do mian? So historically, a poor family would would give their daughter, either the father or the siblings, would give their daughter over into a rich family. And that was the Torah's version of spreading the wealth, because obviously the family's not going to let the machatanim starve. So it was a way of sharing the wealth. If you talk this little girl out of living with this rich fellow, and now suitors come around and she's a poor little orphan, and the only people that are willing to marry her are going to be other poor people or people who's divorced. In other words, people with some pagam in their resume. She's going to say, why didn't I stay with that guy? I was much better off. So rather than risk the little girl being angry at you for talking her into walking out, we say don't do it. Okay? Omen hapikadonos. What about not doing your friend a favor and holding his money for him? Bavor masa. That means holding, literally taking cash, taking actual fungible money from someone that in the same community. The base ki base dame. He's gonna wind up coming to you all the time for money, and it's like he's moving into your house. He's turning your house into his house. So that's why we don't do that. Put your money in the bank. They have hours that you can go pick up your money. Omin ha'eravin. Do not act as a co-signer, a guarantor of a loan. Ba'arve shiltzion. That is referring to the situation that was common in the town of Shiltzion. The Omer Reb Yitzchak, he explains, my diksiv, what does the pasuk mean? Ra yeroya ki arev zar. Trouble after trouble comes upon the fellow who guarantees for a stranger, and that might mean a ger here. Ra'a echad ra'a tavi. One bad thing after another bad thing comes to you. Shemikable gerim, to those who take in converts. Now, this does not mean a ger tzedek comes to the Beis Din and says, I want to become Jewish. This refers to people who go out and proselytize, like the Christians do missionaries. Judaism frowns on missionaries because what happens is you talk the guy into it, and then later on he's not so sure he did the right thing. Okay, and then we'll get that in the Gemara. Ula arve shilitzion, and to not guarantee. What is the problem with this not guarantee? L'tokeya atzmo l'dvar halacha. That says that would be compared to somebody, literally it means who ties himself to a halacha. And we're going to see what that means. We're going to have different explanations of that. Mikabli Gerim, what's the problem with taking in Gerim? The Alma Rebbe Chelbo says, the Aima Rebbe Chelbo, he explains, Kashim Gerim liYisrael Kinisapachas Ba'oir. Taking in multitudes of non-motivated converts are as bad for Israel as tsaras is for a person's skin. Why? Okay, so we'll explain that later on. But now we're going to go back to the co-signing. Arve shel Tzion, guarantees of Tzion, the Avde Shluf Dots. When they wrote the shtar that proved the loan, they would put a clause in the shtar. Reuven wants to lend Shimon money, and Levi comes along and says, I'll guarantee the loan. So they put a clause in the shtar that Reuven can go directly to Levi to collect. He doesn't have to wait for Shimon to default. And now Levi's got the problem of collecting from Shimon. So unless Shimon shows up at 12:01 on the day that you have to pay the afternoon of the 20th, 12:01, he's already hacking Levi. So that's why you don't want to do that. Now, what about cleaving to a matter of law? I don't understand that. Everybody has like a favorite mitzvah. So what's wrong with that? That's not what it means. Takeya atzma l'dvar halacha, here's what it means. Tisanya. Rabbi Yossi Aimer, now we're going to do some philosophy and then we'll get a halachic rationale. Tisanya, we have a brisa of Yossi Aimer, kol ha'omer ein lo Torah. Somebody who says, I have never learned Torah, ein lo Torah. He gets no schar for learning Torah. Okay, pshita. What have you told me new? That's obvious. If you don't learn, you don't get schar from learning. Ella. So let's change it a little. Kol ha'omer ein lo ella Torah. Nothing is important to me except my learning Torah. Ein lo ella Torah. It'll turn out he's going to wind up being impoverished. He'll learn lots of Torah, but you have to keep in mind the rest of life is important too. And he will wind up with only schar for learning Torah. Ha'nami pshita. That's also obvious. If you sit in the base medrash 20 hours a day and nap for 4, you're going to have difficulty getting an income. Ella the afilu Torah ein lo. It means that if you completely negate the other aspects of life, having a family, having food on the table, making a Shabbos, then you won't even get reward for your Torah. So now, my timer, why is that the case? Well, he did spend 24 hours a day learning Torah. Why doesn't he at least get credit for that? Well, he has to live a life. Omer Rav Papa, Omer Kro, Milamdem va'asisem. You learn mitzvahs in order to perform them. Kol sheyashnu va'asiya. Anyone who is in the category of interrupting his learning when he has to do mitzvahs, yashnu b'limuda, then that's also considered learning. The time he's doing the mitzvahs and the mitzvahs he learns. If you spend time learning the different ways to do the ne'uim, so you can go to Nisach Sfard, you can go to Nisach Ashkenaz, that's all learning Torah. Kol she'enu b'asiyah, enu b'limida. But if you just think of Torah as an academic exercise and you sit there on Shabbos with a cigar while you're learning Gemara, then you don't even get schar for the learning. The boy Sema, another explanation of this might be that li'aylam va'armarta ba'ikara, the first rationale, kol ha'omer ein lo ela b'Torah, all I have is Torah, ein lo ela Torah, he'll only get schar for learning Torah, but for no mitzvahs. Lo tzricha deka magmar. No, we have to explain it like this. What happens if you yourself are not so big on getting to shul in the morning, but you give a shiur and you explain the importance of being in shul on time every morning, acharine da azle da avde. And all of your students show up at 7:25 for the 7:30 minyan, so they're all ready to go on time. So what happens? Mahu detema, what might you have argued? Isle agradide, that the teacher, even though he doesn't do it himself, he has a chelek in all of his students performing mitzvahs. Kamash Malan, we learn he does not. You have to practice what you preach, and then you get schar for all those other people as well as your own. But if you are hypocritical, you do not get schar, even if you're makariv other people. Another possibility, and now we're getting to the halachic rationale for the problem. Iboy Seima, you could say like this: Tarkeya atzmo lidvar halacha. He knows a little halacha and he relies on it. Okay, but daina da ase dina l'kaimei. So somebody will come to him and say, "Look, you know a lot of halacha. Here is my shaila, the gomer halacha," and he learned similar inyanim, okay? Medame milsa la milsa. So he will inaccurately draw on what he does know and paskin incorrectly in this case. There's an English saying, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. So that would be the problem. The isle Rabba de la Azil Mishayal. And even though, now what's the problem with this guy? He did the best he could. There's a Rav in the shul. There's a halacha hotline. Unless you absolutely know for sure you know what you're talking about, look it up. You go and you ask a rabbi a shaila, even there's, Rabbi, what do I do when a cold fork fell into a cold sink? Many rabbis have, let me check into it, I'll call you in 20 minutes. Now, all he knows that, he doesn't even have to look it up. But the point is, you establish that you go to authority, and that's the failing over here. So that's the halachic rationale for the cleave to a halacha business, okay? Now, what's wrong with such a judge, right? The Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yona's son, he explains like this: Li'aylam yeraye dayan atzmo ki'ilu cherev munachas lo ben yerachosov. A judge, and there's a different girsa over here, tzevarosav on his neck. But a judge should consider, he's sitting in judgment, or a rav, paskening a shaila for a congregant, should consider, take it with the level of seriousness, as if there is a sharp sword between his thighs. We can all imagine what it might cut. And not only that, the Gehinnim Paischa lo mitachtov. And not only that, but when it falls off, it's going to drop into Gehenna, because Gehenna is gaping open at his feet. Okay? So that Shenemar, because we have a pasuk, Heinei matoso shel Shloimei, at the bed of Shlomo Shishim Geburim Soviv Lo, there were 60 powerful men from Israel surrounding his bed, and mipachet shel gehinnom shedayim alayla, and that the fear of night is that's why he has all these people around him, and pachet shel gehinnom shedayim alayla, and the fear of darkness is associated with Gehenna. Okay, next clause in the Mishnah. The little girl if the little girl has this big sister who is now an almana with no children, and min hatayra, the little girl's husband, should do yibum with the older sister, but the little girl is in the way. So we said we talk her into doing miyan. Rabban Gamliel didn't like that. Rabban Gamliel Aimer im ma'ana, etc. If she does miyun on her own accord, kol hakavod. If not, and then he explained we wait, etc. Boy mine Rav Elazar me Rav. Rav Elazar asked Rav. Now it's clearly
Time limit with the man. Does she have a,
what?
does she have a certain time limit?
She's supposed to do miyan right away.
Right. But if she waits a month,
So what? The sister has to wait 3 months. The sister can't marry the brother-in-law until it's clear she's not pregnant. So she has to wait 3 months. So the little girl is not under any pressure to do miyan in the middle of Shiva. Okay? I mean, she can take her time, but she can't take her time forever. Because remember, we had another opinion that she does take her time forever. She waits till she grows up, till she's 12, and then they both go off. So she should, if you're gonna do it, act like Rabban Gamliel and do it. All right. In any event, boy mine Rav Elazar me Rav Elazar, and this time it's clearly the Amora Rav Elazar asks Rav, my time of the Rabban Gamliel, what's his rationale that when if she does grow up, they both go off. All right. Mishum de kasova kedushe katana milsa taloy. Because the fact of the matter is that when you do kedushin with a little girl, or even possibly nisuya, it's only rabbinic and it's only conditional. And what happens on the day of her birthday of 12, when she's 12 in a day, will retroactively clarify what the status of that relationship was. V'chi g'dayla godle v'hada. If she grows up and becomes an adult, her relationship, so to speak, grows up with her. So if she continues in the relationship with the man when she's an adult, it's as if it was retroactively a valid, real relationship. And just living in the same building and holding themselves out as husband and wife is sufficient. They do not have to actually share a bed. Possibility one, Dilma, maybe they do have to share a bed. Mishum Tikasava, Mekadesh Achais, Yavama, Naftara, Yavama, the Halachalai. Because Rabban Gamliel, holds that once he betroths the little girl, that's strong enough for the sister to have to not need yibum or chalitza. She can just walk off. That's if they did not have bia when she was an adult, 12 in a day. But and now the Gemara is offering another possibility. The thing that best characterizes a marriage is sharing a bed. So if they share a bed, then yes, the adult relationship is an extension of the child age relationship. But if they do not, so to speak, confirm the relationship with Bia, remember, Bia is a valid form of marriage, then no. Then the fact that there was a child relationship and their relationship remains on a rabbinic level. Those are the possibilities, okay? Omerle. So Rav answers Rav Elazar. Hainu time of the Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel has an opinion as to which case is valid. Mishum de Kasavar Mikadesh Ochos Yavama Niftara Yavama V'Halacha. Simply, even doing Kedushin, even midrabanan with the little girl, bia is not the determining factor, because Kedushin you can't do bia. Once there's some connection between the little girl and the older man, then the Yavama is not a Yavama, so to speak, and she can go about her business. Now, if he does do bia with her, then it's he's picking version 2. If he confirms that the relationship was valid by doing nisuyin, or even without nisuyin, doing bia when she's 12 and a day, which constitutes nisuyin, then the relationship really was on firm ground. And low. But if he doesn't sleep with her any after she's 12, then it was not on firm ground. And that's the rationale for his saying you have to wait till she grows up, because we want to convert it into a deraisa marriage if possible.
Should I just take his word that he did or did not do?
We learned that earlier. We had that the other day. If she claims he hasn't slept with her and he claims she has, we believe her if it's less than a month. If it's but we believe him if it's between a month and a year. We had that before. Okay. So now we're all right. So now we're going weiter. Omer Reb Sheshes, we're almost out of here. Omer Reb Sheshes, Amina ki Nayem v'shachiv Rav. I think that Rav was dozing off or even had fallen asleep. Amr lahashmaita, when Rav said, "Yeah, you wait till she grows up, and whether the bia occurs or not is the determining factor." I think that Rav was just sleeping. He didn't realize what he was saying. The Sanya, because there's a brisa that says, you don't have to either or. You don't have to be wishy-washy about it. Hamakadesh esakatana kiddushecha teluyin. That until you go further with an isuyin, a betrothal with a little girl is an iffy situation altogether. My teluyin, what does it mean? It's specific. Love, doesn't it mean we're trying to support Rav now? Igdola Magdale Bahada. If she grows up, then the relationship, so to speak, grows up with her. We had this before. Afal Gaftalo Baal, even if the husband isn't actually sleeping with her, once she becomes an adult, their relationship transitions from a rabbinic to a diraisa, all by itself, simply with the ticking of the clock. She's now 12 and a day. So therefore, Rav's position that you require bia to translate to diraisa may not be so. Amalei Rav in Bereda Rav Nachman, Rav the son of Nachman suggests to Rav Sheshes, Ha Milsa de Katana, Milsa Teluya the Kaima. Maybe what we say is that from his side, it's what it is, but from her side, that's where there may be some conditionality. Okay, if he sleeps with her, and obviously she's then willing to sleep with him when she is 12 and a day or older, then retroactively it establishes the relationship and the transition to a diraisa marriage happens. But if he does not sleep with her, So he's not treating her as a wife. She doesn't have the opportunity to say, I want to be treated as a wife, and therefore it remains rabbinic. Okay, the Amra, because what she says is, and this is a nice little piece of psychology. She says, he controls me. I'm just a 11-year-old. He's a 50-year-old man. He's got all the money. He's got all the power. On the other hand, I have the ability to walk out. So that equalizes, and we're more or less on equal footing, even though superficially she has no power and he has all the power. Hu adif minai, he's more powerful than me. Va'ani adifna minei, but I also am better than him. I have the power to do miyun. So they're on equal footing. And when they get to 12 in a day, they will have bia and confirm the relationship. And therefore, Rav's point of view may be the definitive point of view. Okay, so we'll just do a little bit more. V'sover Rav ibol eini lo boelo. Does Rav really require that they actually slept together when she was 12? V'ha itmar, but we have a limud. Ketana shalom ma'ano, a little girl who did not back out of the marriage. It was by the brother or the mother, and she did not back out while she was a child. And she made no decision, no declaration whatsoever. But okay, the Hiskadla, and on her 12th birthday, meaning she's 12 in a day, Amda Venises. She goes and she marries a 15-year-old boy. She doesn't want to remember, we had earlier that if she goes and marries when she's still 11, there's no greater miyun than that. So now what happens if the clock ticked and she's 12 in a day and she goes off and marries the other guy? So Rav Omer, ain't it tzricha get misheni. We split them up because she is an Ashes Ish. But we say that had no validity whatsoever because she did not do miyan when she was the day before she was 12 in a day. So now she's confirmed as his husband midiraisa without bia. And she doesn't, all they do is split her up from the 15-year-old boy because that marriage didn't happen. She's simply an adulteress. Okay? V'shmuel omer tzricha get mishen. No, we have a chashash that maybe the relationship still is midrabanan because he didn't sleep with her on her birthday. And therefore, it is at least theoretically possible that the second relationship did become a marriage because Torah trumps Rabbanan. But they can't stay together because at least with the Rabbanan, she's an Ashes Ish. So we split them up and we cry her a get. And the next is goes on for a bit, so we'll stop there. And that was without Reuven.
Did a pretty good job without Reuven.
That do not take that as reshus to not come today.
Imagine how it would have been if you had Reuven.
For a Biden man, you mentioned Trump 8 times.
As a verb, not as a noun. As a verb, not as a noun. And I don't grant pardons. Okay.
I found it a very difficult tomorrow.
No, if you just keep in mind the